if you put in 100 pounds of flour into the bowl, you might put 120, 140 or more pounds of sugar. And it's got to be high ratio to handle that much sugar. You have to chlorinate it. You have to bleach it. And the chlorination allows the starches to gel, even though there's so much sugar in that system. And it weakens the gluten to keep it from being tough. So it makes the starches gel at lower temperatures, and it weakens the gluten so that you don't have a bready kind of cake. It's super tender. Creates a bit of acid also. The flour that's bleached with chlorine, this chlorine gas that they do that with. It lowers the pH from a neutral of 7, about, somewhere between lemon juice and neutral. So low ratio cake is like a muffin, slightly less sweet, or pound cake. And a pound cake was called that because it was a pound of butter, a pound of flour, and a pound of sugar, right? And eggs. And so you can actually, with a pound cake or a low ratio cake, you can use all-purpose type flour. Has equal or less sugar than flour by weight. And the oldest form of a pound cake didn't require any baking powder at all. And because through the cream up stage, those are those of you familiar with creaming up the sugar and the fat before you make okay. By doing that, you're incorporating air, just like whipping cream. It goes from cream, which has no structure, to whipped cream, which you could put a coin on top and it'll hold it. So the same material goes from no structure to tons of structure. By creaming that fat and the eggs and the sugar, you create an emulsion that actually has structure, and it's what carries microscopic little air bubbles into your cake batter. And it'll expand on its own. You don't have to have any baking powder. Most of the pound cake recipes you'll see will have some baking powder in them because it is difficult. You got to have pretty good technique to whip it up just right. Okay. Pound cakes have a characteristic split on the top, and that's because of the steam leavening. It only finishes leavening when it gets up right around the finish of cooking at 200 degrees, right at the boiling point of water, and causes it, it's already set on top, to split. Kuchen or Kuchen, are you guys familiar with that? Kuchen?
German.
It's my favorite pastry now. Okay, I just exposed to it. So you go everywhere in the United States, you find something. And Kuchen.
As soon as I said with a Star Trek.
We're going to have a Star Trek term in here in a second. Multiphasic. Anyway, it's a low ratio cake with some custard on top, a little bit of cinnamon, and it is absolutely superb. I don't like the super sweet cakes, and so I finally got one after hearing about it up here for 6 months, and it was great. So, and I know we're kind of just blazing through this, but
It's me again.
brownies. And it's true. I mean, the way to make a brownie with a cake mix is just cut the water. And it's one of these counterintuitive things where someone thinks, well, if you cut the water, wouldn't it make it drier? No. And I've been to a lot of bakeries when you get called out, it's like, my brownies are too dry, my brownies are too dry. I keep adding water, and it just comes out like a cake, and it's dry. And I'm like, well, that's your problem, because if given enough water, the starches will expand and then set, and you have a cake. But if you starve it enough of water, the starches will never gel, and it'll collapse. And so basically, it's a failed cake. It's a cake that couldn't rise and couldn't hold its own weight. And so I'm sure somebody made a few of those one day and go, well, that's not so bad. In fact, my kids love it. I'm going to start making this now. And, but there's not enough water in the formula.
Brownies sounds better than failed cake. Yeah.
You know, the lab manager that I work with thought the same thing. It's like, come on,
We need to reterm this something or other. Can't sell failed cakes.
oh, it gets better. Cookie's a failed brownie.
Maybe it's all the failed stuff.
Well, if you think about it,
Being a failure was so good.
yeah, I know, right? Well, you know, it's that batter that spills off on the side and it's crispy. You go, oh man, I like it. Or the edge of the brownie, you know. But again, a cookie, you know, those of us that have made cookies, you add almost no water. I mean, the water comes from the egg, and some cookies have a teaspoon of water, most don't have any water. Some sugar cookies have a little bit. But there's not enough water there. Once you've got the sugar and the salt, the starches have no chance. If you look under a microscope at a cookie, none of the starch is gelled, okay? It just turns into gooey deliciousness, right? But it doesn't actually gel.
So is it okay to eat the cookie dough?
Well, I do.
There's the biggest culprit right there.
I eat cookie dough. But I was working for Nestle when they had the recall, and because of the Listeria eggs, or salmonella, and made some people sick. That's, you know, I'm going to be careful not to give health advice, but I eat cookie dough. If I've been in the park playing and I know I've got dirt on my hands and I go to eat lunch, I'm not too concerned about it, you know? I'm just...
The only item in it that's of concern would be the egg, right?
Well, flour itself is uncooked, right? So the flour can have micro, and it might have bugs.
So how long can wheat sit around before it's milled?
Years.
Yeah. As
Yeah.
long as it doesn't come in contact with moisture and...
That's correct. It's, you know, in the stories of Egypt, you know, where they had years of famine, you know, they stored wheat and grain for 7 years, supposedly. And there's a historical, what's his name, Josephus, the Egyptian scribe, you know, wrote about that, separate from other religious documents. He wrote independently those stories of famine, and so, yeah, you can store it a long time. And...
Didn't they sprout some of the wheat they found in Tut's tomb too, or didn't that?
I've heard that.
I think so.
I can't verify that. But yeah, there's only a couple forms that, so once you mill in the flour, your storage is reduced. You can only store it so long. You can store the flour for a year or more, but not 7. And so what Ben Franklin did with his grains, they would convert them to whiskey. And so you can store whiskey, again, for decades. And so that's one of the reasons that people started brewing and distilling the grains, is because if you had this huge cash crop and the market wasn't where you wanted it to be, you couldn't really store it forever. If you didn't have modern techniques to keep the rodents and things out, you'd lose some every year. So you could convert it to whiskey.
And where do you recommend storing flour? Because if you store flour in the refrigerator, it seems to last longer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so at the American Institute of Baking, they have flour that they have suspended at, they have some at minus 40. And at minus 40 degrees, it will last 100 years.
Minus 40?
Minus 40. Now, home freezers hardly get less than 0 to minus